if you're a med spa owner and you are interested in preventing legal problems versus waiting for them to find you and spending way more money to correct them, maybe you have massive growth coming up in your med spa, then you're going to want to watch this interview here today. I have Sara Shikhman, managing partner with Lengea Law, and she specializes in helping medical spa practices across the country to help with all of their legal questions and structures and growth strategies and potentially problems. So hi, Sara, how are you? Thanks so much for being on this call today.
Hi, Caitlin. Happy to be here. Happy to do this webinar and share some information and some of the things that I've learned along the way that'll hopefully, help some of your clients and some other medical spas around the country.
Absolutely. Well, let's dive right in, get to the good stuff. In fact, today we're going to be covering some of the top legal mistakes that med spas are making. So let's dive right in. Give me that first one that you commonly see.
The first legal mistake we commonly see medical spas make is how they're legally structured. So in different states, there are different rules around it, and they're very particular. And so a lot of medical spas are not structured correctly. And that's the number one mistake that we see. And that's one of the number one ways people get investigated for when they're not structured correctly.
And is that something that you feel like is something that you can just research and figure it out on your own? Or what's the real benefit in hiring a legal professional to handle that for you?
I think some things you can research on your own, depending on how much time you have and how much appetite for risk you have. So if you get it wrong, you only have yourself to blame, versus if you hire a lawyer, you can always go to the lawyer. So I think in some states, it's kind of straightforward, especially in the states where maybe a nurse practitioner has full independent practice authority. Then it's a little bit of an easier question, like who can own this medical spa? But in many of the more complicated states like New York, California, Texas, Florida, it's kind of a pretty sophisticated legal analysis of who can own a medical spa and what treatments can be performed there and how exactly it has to be structured. So it pays to really, I think, hire some kind of expert to get you the right answer, because it's sort of it's not like one law that you look up and you're like, oh, wow, I found it. Great. It's more like a combination of 5 different things that you have to piece together like a puzzle.
And what could be some of the ramifications that could happen if I don't set up my med spa properly, if the structure is wrong?
Sure. So then you wouldn't be protected if something was to go wrong. A lot of times in an insurance contract, for example, it says, I, as the owner, I represent and warrant that I'm set up correctly, that I have everything is legally compliant and all these things. So 1, your insurance most likely will not cover you. 2, your state boards may come after you. You may be told that you're practicing medicine and you're not allowed to, or that, whatever your company is authorized to do, you're going beyond that. So you may get in trouble with the state and the attorney general and a lot of bad things that, sometimes include big fines, jail time, losing your license. I mean, everyone in this industry, we've all worked hard for our businesses and spent years getting our experience and our licensure. And so I think it pays to get an expert to do this piece for you, because then you can be sure it's done correctly.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I've also heard of med spa owners who, they think they know what the laws are in their state of what the legal structure is going to be. And then they go online and they try to buy a template, right? But there's one little thing that they miss. And so all of those challenges and problems that you just talked about, they're not covered because they're not structured properly. And so then they have to go back and then, pay more money to get it done right. So this is one of those things, right, where you just need to pay a professional the first time around to get it right for you, because there's a whole cascade of problems that could potentially take place if you don't have this right.
Yeah, and you want to sleep at night, right? Like you're spending money on marketing and you have this great, funnel through which company, like your clients are coming in and everything is going great and you're hiring employees and you're opening locations. So you just want to make sure that like everything is set up correctly, because one day you may want to sell your business, bring on a partner, and they're also going to ask you in this purchase contract, like to represent that everything is set up correctly, that your company is compliant. And if it's not, a lot of times what happens is they can hold back some of the money. So even if someone agrees to buy your practice, like, for $5 million, and I've been part of situations where this has happened, they could not give you the rest of the money because you were not set up correctly from the beginning.
That's awful. That's awful. Okay, so you mentioned a couple of things in there when you were talking about being compliant. So let's move on to the next common legal mistake that you see med spas doing.
Yeah, the next common mistake is scope of practice. And that kind of relates to your treatment protocols and how you're delegating your services. I mean, it makes sense in every industry, right? Like, Caitlin, you don't do everything yourself, right? I don't do everything myself in my law firm. It makes sense that we would want to delegate it to other people. But with healthcare, it's like highly regulated. Just because you see everybody else delegating something to an esthetician or an RN or an LPN, it doesn't mean that it's actually allowed. So the second most common mistake is scope of practice. And that's the number one reason we see people get investigated. So when we get called saying, oh, the board of nursing came in today and they requested records for the last 100 patients, most of the time they're looking for a scope of practice issue, because most of the time a competitor said, hey, they have RNs doing this and there's no prescriber on site. That's a common situation. So scope of practice is like the second big legal mistake that we see people make.
And what is the ramification if you are like caught not following scope of practice properly?
So the ramifications can be as much as losing your license. I mean, there are usually a financial ramification. The penalties are not, usually the ones that we've seen are not in the millions. They're usually under $100,000, but I mean, that's still a huge amount of money.
Yes.
But you can lose your license as the medical director of an improperly structured practice, or as an NP who's, having a bunch of RNs doing treatments without the NP doing a good faith exam first, or being an RN and not doing things within your scope of practice. So everyone in that system can get into a lot of trouble. We've seen people lose their license. We've seen suspended licenses for years, huge reputational damage, because the stuff, a lot of it becomes public record. So whenever someone Googles your name, in addition to your great reviews, they're also going to see this, the outcome of this unpleasant situation.
Yeah, this scope of practice is such a tricky one. I talk about this with my clients when we're trying to squeeze all the juice out of a calendar to fit clients here and there, right? And from state to state, it really does vary. And so I have some clients that, are part of masterminds, or they go to a big conference, right? And they learn this new thing. But then, and when they go back to, their state, their med spa, they really need to make sure that the protocol and the recommendation is within, scope of practice specifically for their state. That varies greatly from state to state, right?
Yeah, like a good example of this is microneedling. So in some states, it's totally okay for a esthetician to do microneedling. In some states, it's not even okay for a nurse practitioner to do microneedling. That doesn't mean that the laser rep is not going to sell you their RF microneedling device. It means that you may come in and you have this $300,000 device and you don't have anyone in your office to do it. And so you say, well, maybe this one time, maybe I can do it, or the esthetician can do it. But it's very dangerous, because if something was to go wrong, you would not have any coverage. The employee doing it would say, hey, you knowingly did this. It's not my fault, it's yours. The insurance wouldn't cover you, and the cosmetology board or the nursing board also wouldn't really like you doing that. So there are a lot of these kind of treatments that frankly are too new for the law. So they're not covered in the law. And so you may think that you can absolutely do it, but actually you can't.
Yeah, I see it. I see it time and time again. Those damn laser reps or device reps, like they're just trying to sell you a machine. Like they don't really help you to do your due diligence and really map out like what the execution model is going to look like in your business utilizing that device, right? Not only just like the marketing, of course, but the scope of practice and protocols, and they're just trying to sell you a device. Like you really gotta.
Yeah, I mean, they're just doing their job. They're trying to sell you a device. They're good salespeople. Like nothing wrong with that. But you can't rely on your laser. If like your defense to the medical board cannot be, well, my laser rep Brad told me, you know, I could do this. Like they'll be like, okay, that's great. Where's Brad now? But so I think, and that's happened even when I, you know, own a practice. Like that happened to us. Like we bought some things. We were told that it's fine. You know, we didn't check. We thought, okay, he was certain. So why would I check? This guy, he sounded like he's been doing it for 20 years, but you still have to check. Because a lot of times, you know, some of these things can have complications, and if something goes wrong, the malpractice lawyers will also look to see, okay, like, do they have a written treatment protocol for this? Okay, what did it say? In their protocol, did they actually say that this device can be done by X person? You know, and is that allowed in the state? Okay, if it's not, then there's another thing that we can, you know, hold against these people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've also heard of clients telling me as well as in their state, the language can be kind of gray on some of these things in the interpretations. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, good question. So a lot of times the language is totally gray because the language came out like years before the technology came out. So the language may say like laser, or it may say radio frequency, but it may not mention your exact device. So is like a CO2 ablative laser covered in their definition of laser? Is like RF microneedling covered in, you know, their definition of radio frequency? So the way we usually deal with it is we contact the people we know at the medical boards or the nursing boards, and we ask them, hey, can you clarify, does this include this? But most of the time, even after we contact them, the answer sometimes is, we can't give you an opinion on this. This is what the law says. You know, it's up to you guys to interpret it, because if the person there on the other end can't really say more than what is said, you know, on paper. So sometimes we ask them for like an interpretive opinion or a declaration of like what it should be. So we say, hey, we have a client, confidential, you know, how would you deal with the situation? And sometimes they get back, and sometimes they don't. Right. You know, some boards will issue this declaratory opinion, and some will not.
Makes it difficult. Makes it really difficult. That's when you need to have a really good lawyer.
And a good, you know, positive state of mind. You know, I think with this, it's like the industry is growing so quickly and things are changing so quickly. So a lot of these gray areas are being sorted out. So there's like proposals in many states about microneedling, about laser hair removal, about who can own what. So it is getting more and more clarified, but you just have to be very careful, especially if you want your med spa to grow. Like the bigger you are, the more attention you draw to yourself, and the more chance there is that eventually there's going to be some sort of investigation. You can't treat 10,000 people and everything to be perfect. It's just like statistically not possible. So there will be some kind of problem. So as you get bigger and bigger, these things become bigger and bigger challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. All right, let's move on to the third top legal mistake that you're seeing med spas do.
Yep. And the third one I would say is violating HIPAA in one way or another. Either at the federal HIPAA level or some sort of state privacy rules. And a lot of states have very strict rules in addition to the HIPAA rules. And so posting on social media and even communicating with clients are like big areas of where sometimes if you don't have the right type of consent from the client and it's not completely compliant with the law, there are these mandated penalties for these things, especially HIPAA. So it's not like you say, oh, okay, sorry, you have to report to the government that this happened, you have to pay fines. So it's a big deal about, violating patient privacy. And it's hard. Like sometimes, let's say a client leaves you not a great review. You want to respond and say, well, actually, this person looks great. They're so happy. They were happy yesterday, whatever. They're crazy. You can't do that.
Yeah, it really is a tricky one. And so you want to make sure that you try to set yourself up for success as much as possible. So what are some of the things that you could help a med spa out with, trying to make sure that they are HIPAA compliant?
Yeah. So first of all, you have to have a HIPAA privacy policy that is on your website, and that also is something that your staff knows, and that they sign, that they know, and that you present it to your clients, and your clients sign that they received a copy of your privacy practices. So that's a document we can help with. Another thing is making sure you have a really good consent from your clients whenever you're posting their pictures online. That talks about where you're going to post them, how you're going to post them, are you going to edit them in any way? Is it going to be in perpetuity? Or are you going to pay them anything for this? And who has the right to post the pictures? This is a big deal because it also kind of comes into solicitation of your clients. So like when a client gives you consent to the practice to post their pictures, they're actually giving consent to the practice, not to Sarah's account or Amy's account, and not to mention their name or to necessarily say what treatments they got. So if you want to post on, if you want to post what treatment they got, you have to make sure that in the consent that they sign, that they're giving you the right to say which treatment they actually got, not just, some blanket consent. And if you don't have the consent, you can get into a lot of trouble because they could say, you're violating their privacy rights.
That's so good. So, you mentioned like several different things within the consent forms and the different options and whatnot. And I've seen a lot when I'm doing reviews with med spas, or if I'm being a secret shopper and I fill out the new patient paperwork, there are few and far between med spas that, from what you just described, has the proper consent forms. And again, what you were talking about is some of the ramifications that people aren't even realizing that they're at risk for is tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines, and jeopardizing, if not losing, your license, right, to practice. It's a big deal.
Right. Yeah. And it's just, a couple of pieces of paper that could save you from thousands of dollars of trouble later. So it's better to do it, ahead of time, and get it set up correctly, thinking about it as more of like the cost of like starting a business or growing your business rather than wait for something like a blow up. Because also when employees and business partners and vendors see these like blow ups at your place, it's not great. It's very distracting. It's very bad for your reputation. So we recommend to people, like, it's better to just do it ahead of time. Prevention is cheaper than correction. And then you could sleep at night and move on and focus on marketing and bringing new clients to your business.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Sleep at night. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Sara. You've been so informative. And if you have watched to the end, I know Sara has a special offer that she is going to give anyone that's watched this video. What do you have for them?
So two things, actually. One, we're going to send you the complete guide to the top 10 mistakes that medical spas make and how you can not get into those mistakes. So we talked about 3 on this call. We have 7 more that we can send you. And then we also offer a free 15-minute consultation to everyone. So if you have any questions, we're always available. Just schedule it on our website. It's lengealaw.com. And, we look forward to helping you.
Awesome. And we're going to link that up when we share this interview so that you can get the complete guide, as well as sign up for that free 15-minute consultation, because we want to make sure all med spas out there, one, that can really sleep at night and really not putting your med spa at jeopardy by just not getting set up properly from the get-go. So we want to save you tens of thousands of dollars in potential, fines and headaches. And then obviously we want you holding onto that license and really, growing your med spa and not, spending time going the other direction. So Sara, it was awesome having you here. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Caitlin. My pleasure.
Bye.